The email arrived on a Tuesday night, just as I was finishing my last college assignment of the semester. Cassie, honey, about the summer trip to Hawaii. We need to postpone until next year. Things are tight financially right now. I stared at the screen, my heart dropping like a stone. Postponed? The trip we'd been planning for over a year? The celebration for my college graduation? The vacation I'd been counting down to for 342 days? Gone just like that, in a 3-sentence email from Mom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I remember sitting there in my dorm room, the blue light of my laptop casting shadows across my face as I read and reread those words. This couldn't be happening. We'd been talking about this trip for so long, our first real family vacation in almost a decade. I'd already bought a new swimsuit, researched all the best local spots, even learned a few Hawaiian phrases. I'd picked up extra tutoring hours to help cover my share of the expenses. My roommate Jen glanced over, noticing my expression. Everything okay? My family canceled our Hawaii trip, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Money? Issues, apparently. She winced sympathetically. That sucks. I'm sorry. I nodded, closing my laptop. Disappointment settled heavy in my chest, but I understood financial struggles. My parents had always been honest about money, sometimes brutally so. We'd had lean Christmases, birthday celebrations postponed until payday, school trips I couldn't attend. So while I was crushed about Hawaii, I knew my parents wouldn't cancel unless they absolutely had to. I called Mom the next morning, needing to hear her voice, to understand what had happened. I know you're disappointed, sweetheart, she said, sounding genuinely regretful. But your father's company is going through cutbacks, and we just can't swing it right now. I get it, I said, though my chest felt tight. Maybe we could do something smaller, a weekend at Cedar Lake instead? Or I could help more with the costs. Cassie, she interrupted gently, it's just not the right time. We'll make it happen next year, I promise. A promise. One that felt oddly familiar, like echoes of Christmas mornings when the one gift I really wanted wasn't under the tree but was always promised for next time. Okay, I said finally. Next year. But something in her voice nagged at me. A slight hesitation, a beat too long before her responses. My mom had always been a terrible liar. Even as a kid, I could tell when she was hiding something. Still, I pushed the thought away. Why would she lie about this? I threw myself into finals week, channeling my disappointment into studying. The trip cancellation stung, but I had a 4. 0 GPA to maintain and job applications to complete. Life went on, or so I told myself. It was 3 days later when everything changed. I was taking a study break, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. My younger brother Ryan's post. My thumb froze mid-scroll. There he was, standing, on a beach, azure waves crashing behind him, palm trees swaying in the tropical breeze. The location tag read, Waikiki Beach, Honolulu. Time seemed to stop. I blinked, thinking I'd misread, that it was an old photo, a joke, anything but what it appeared to be. But the caption made my stomach twist into knots. Surprise family. Vacation. Best way to kick off summer. Family time. Hawaii, blessed. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembling, I tapped through to his profile and saw more photos. My parents lounging by a resort pool, my sister Megan posing with a lei around her neck, my dad attempting to surf. All posted within the last 24 hours. They hadn't postponed the trip. They had just gone without me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They'd lied. Straight to my face, they had lied. And not about something small, about a family vacation, about excluding me from a trip I'd been looking forward to for a year. I tried to rationalize it, desperately searching for an explanation that wouldn't shatter my heart. Maybe it was a last-minute deal they couldn't pass up. Maybe they'd won the trip somehow? Maybe there was some reason they couldn't bring me, something they were trying to protect me from. But deep down, I knew. There was no explanation that could make this okay. With shaking hands, I called my mom's cell. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. Same result. I even tried Ryan, though I knew he wouldn't pick up either. They were probably all enjoying some luau, sipping tropical drinks with little umbrellas while I sat alone in my dorm room, betrayed and forgotten. I dropped my phone on my bed and walked to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. And there, with the shower running to mask the sound, I cried. Hard, gulping sobs that felt ripped from somewhere deep inside me. Not just for the missed vacation, but for what it represented. I wasn't important enough to include. I wasn't worth the truth. When I finally emerged, red-eyed and exhausted, Jen took one look at me and asked what happened. I showed her the photos, my voice flat as I explained. That's messed up, Cassie, she said, her eyes wide with disbelief. Like, seriously messed up. Yeah, I whispered. It is. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, watching as more photos appeared online. Each new image was another twist of the knife. There was my family, building memories without me, laughing, connecting, experiencing things together, while I was explicitly excluded. By morning, anger had replaced shock. I drafted about 20 different messages, some tearful, some raging, some coldly formal. But in the end, I sent none of them. What was the point? They had made their choice, and it wasn't me. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I blocked them all on social media. Not because I couldn't bear to see more photos, though that was true, but because for once, I wanted to be the one who disappeared. Let them wonder where I went for a change. For the next week, I went through finals on autopilot. I aced every exam because academics had always been my refuge, the one place where effort reliably translated to results. But inside, I felt hollow. My phone filled with missed calls and texts once they returned from their postponed trip. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. I tried to understand how we'd gotten here, how my family could so casually exclude me from something important. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't an isolated incident. This was just the first time I couldn't ignore the pattern. Growing up, Ryan and Megan had always been the priority. Ryan with his football games that the whole family attended religiously. Megan with her dance recitals that required expensive costumes and weekend competitions. Meanwhile, my academic achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods and "that's nice, honey" comments. When I made National Honor Society, no one came to the induction ceremony because it conflicted with one of Ryan's games. When I won the state science fair, My parents sent my elderly neighbor to drive me because Megan had a dance competition that weekend. I'd spent my whole life understanding, accommodating, making it easy for them to overlook me. I'd told myself it was because I was the oldest, the responsible one, the one who didn't need as much attention or support. But staring at those Hawaii photos, the truth couldn't be denied any longer. It wasn't that they thought I didn't need them. It was that they didn't think of me at all. The semester ended. Most students were headed home for summer break, but I'd already arranged to stay in a sublet apartment near campus for my internship at the university research lab. I'd told my parents about this arrangement months ago, but now I was grateful for the distance it would provide. The night before, I moved out of the dorms. My phone rang with my mom's number. After a week of ignored calls, I finally felt ready to answer. "Cassie? Thank goodness, we've been so worried." Mom's voice was a mixture of relief and annoyance. I said nothing, waiting. "Why haven't you been answering our calls? And did you block us online? What's going on with you?" The casual way she asked, as if I was the one who had done something wrong, ignited something inside me. "I saw the photos, Mom," I said quietly. A pause. Then, "What photos, honey?" "Don't," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I'd ever used with her. "Just don't. I saw the photos from Hawaii. The trip you told me was postponed, because you couldn't afford it right now. The family vacation that apparently didn't include me." Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her mind racing for an acceptable explanation. "Cassie, it's not what you think." "Then what is it? What possible reason could you have for lying to me and excluding me from a family trip?" She sighed, defeated. "We thought, with your internship starting right after finals, you wouldn't be able to come anyway. It seemed easier to tell you it was postponed than to have you feel bad about missing it." "Easier," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Easier for who, Mom? Because it wasn't easier for me to find out through Instagram that my entire family went on vacation without me. We were going to tell you." "When? After you got back? After I saw all the photos? Or were you just going to pretend it never happened and hope I wouldn't find out?" Another long pause. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "We didn't think it through." "That's the problem, isn't it? You didn't think about me at all." I heard her intake of breath, the beginnings of a defense, but I wasn't finished. "This isn't just about the trip, Mom. It's about my entire life. When was the last time anything I did mattered as much as Ryan's games or Megan's dancing? When was the last time you rearranged your schedule for one of my events? When was the last time I wasn't an afterthought?" "That's not fair, Cassie. We've always supported you." "No," I interrupted, surprised by my own steadiness. "You've always expected me to support myself. There's a difference." The conversation went in circles after that. Mom alternated between defensive justifications and guilt-laden apologies, neither of which addressed the real issue. Dad got on the phone briefly, his awkward attempts at explanation falling equally flat. Ryan texted a half-hearted, "Esrai, you couldn't come" message that made me laugh bitterly. Only Megan, in her typically self-absorbed way, managed to be accidentally honest. "We didn't think you'd care that much," she said when I finally answered her call. "You're always so independent, doing your own thing." "Independent by necessity," I replied, "not by choice." After nearly 2 hours of exhausting conversations with various family members, I was drained but clearer than I'd been in years. I'd spent my life making excuses for them, filling in the gaps in their attention with my own rationalizations. No more. As I packed up my dorm room the next day, I made a decision. I wouldn't cut them off completely. They were still my family, and somewhere beneath the hurt, I still loved them. But I wouldn't keep contorting myself to fit into the spaces they occasionally remembered to leave for me. I would build my own life, my own memories, my own journeys, and I would do it unapologetically. That summer became a turning point. While my family continued to call and text, I responded selectively, maintaining polite distance. I stopped trying to make them understand how I felt. I stopped hoping they would suddenly change. Instead, I poured myself into my internship. I made friends with the other summer students. I explored the city on weekends, finding hidden bookstores and coffee shops that became my personal sanctuaries. I started a blog documenting my solo adventures, each post a declaration of independence. When Jen invited me to join her family's annual camping trip in the mountains, I said yes without hesitation. They welcomed me warmly, including me in their traditions as if I'd always been part of them. Around their campfire, laughing and roasting, marshmallows under the stars, I realized family could feel different than what I'd grown up with. It could feel like belonging. By midsummer, my parents were making noise about me coming home for a visit. "We miss you," Mom texted. "The house isn't the same without you." I believed she meant it in her way, but I also recognized the familiar pattern. They noticed my absence only after I stopped filling in the gaps for them, stopped making it easy to forget me. "I'm pretty busy," I replied. "Maybe later in the summer." It wasn't spite driving my response, though perhaps there was a small, justified part of me that wanted them to experience what it felt like to be an afterthought. Mostly, it was self-preservation. I was healing, building something new, and I wasn't ready to risk that fragile progress by stepping back into old dynamics. I did eventually agree to a weekend visit in August. It was awkward and tense in ways my family wasn't equipped to handle. They oscillated between pretending nothing had changed and making overly enthusiastic efforts to include me in everything. "We kept all your favorite foods in the house," Mom said proudly, opening the refrigerator to reveal items I hadn't actually liked since high school. "I saved my playoff game video for you to watch," Ryan added, as if doing me a favor. Dad hovered uncertainly in the background, clearly unsure of his role in this reconciliation attempt. Only Megan seemed to understand something fundamental had shifted. She found me alone in the backyard one evening, gazing up at the stars. "You're different," she observed, sitting beside me on the old wooden swing. I nodded. "I am." "Are you still mad about Hawaii?" I considered her question carefully. "I'm not mad anymore," I said finally, "but I haven't forgotten it either." She was quiet for a moment. I miss the old you, the one who always went along with everything. Despite myself, I smiled. "That's the problem, Megan. Everyone got used to me going along with everything, even when it hurt me." "Is that why you're not coming to my dance showcase next weekend? To hurt us back?" "No," I said, turning to look at her directly. "I'm not coming because I have plans with friends I made a commitment to. Just like you all had plans in Hawaii that didn't include me." She flinched slightly but nodded. "I guess that's fair." That weekend visit clarified something important. Change wouldn't happen overnight. My family wasn't suddenly going to transform into the attentive, equitable unit I'd longed for. They might never fully understand how their actions had affected me over the years. But I had changed. And that was enough to start with. As summer drew to a close and my junior year of college approached, I made another decision. The holidays had always been a source of stress, with me contorting my schedule to accommodate everyone else's priorities. This year would be different. I'm going to spend Thanksgiving break with Jen's family, I told my parents during our weekly phone call. They invited me to their cabin in Vermont. The silence that followed was telling. "But you always come home for Thanksgiving," Mom finally said, her voice small. "It's tradition." "I need to create some new traditions," I replied gently. I expected argument, guilt-tripping, perhaps even anger. Instead, after a long pause, my dad spoke up. "We understand, Cassie," he said, his voice gruff with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "But we'll miss you." Those 5 words, "but we'll miss you," shouldn't have hit me as hard as they did. Such a simple acknowledgement of my absence, of my value to them. Why had it taken so long to hear it? That fall semester, something unexpected happened. My family began to reach out in ways they never had before. Not just the obligatory check-in, calls, but genuine attempts to connect. Mom sent care packages with actual things I liked, not just what she thought I should like. Dad emailed articles related to my research interests, sometimes with thoughtful questions attached. Ryan asked for my help with his college applications, admitting he was trying to be smart like you. Even Megan, in her self-centered teenage way, began sending me selfies from her daily life with captions like, "Wish you were here to make fun of my hair," or "This coffee shop has your name written all over it." Small things, imperfect things, but sincere attempts to see me, to include me, to acknowledge my absence as a loss. I didn't rush to forgive or forget. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. But I did begin to respond, cautiously opening the door to what our relationship might become. In October, an email arrived that made me pause. Subject: Christmas planning. Inside was a detailed itinerary for the family's Christmas celebration, with my input explicitly requested on everything from menu planning to activity scheduling. At the bottom was a note from Mom. "We know you might have other plans, and we'll understand if you can't make it home. But we're really hoping you'll come. This time we're planning it together, all of us." I sat with that email for a long time, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to decline on principle, to show them that their behavior had consequences. But another part recognized the effort, imperfect as it was, to change. In the end, I replied with my availability and preferences, along with a boundary. "I'll be there December 23rd, 26th, but I've already committed to spending New Year's with friends." Their response was immediate and positive, accepting my terms without complaint. It felt different, like they were finally seeing me as an autonomous person with my own life, not just a role in theirs. The Hawaii betrayal had broken something fundamental between us. But maybe, I thought cautiously, that breaking had been necessary, creating space for something new to grow in its place. Not the uncomplicated family dynamic of childhood, but something more complex, more honest, and ultimately more real. As November turned to December and the semester wound down, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The pain of that Instagram revelation had been acute, a lightning strike that illuminated everything. But what followed? The slow, difficult work of setting boundaries, of refusing to be an afterthought, of building a life centered on my own worth, that had been the true transformation. I didn't know what Christmas would bring. I didn't know if my family's efforts would last or fade once the shock of my pulling away had worn off. I didn't know if we'd ever fully heal the fractures that had formed not just from Hawaii, but from years of accumulated neglect. But I did know this. I would never again make myself small to fit into someone else's story, not even my family's. I would write my own narrative now, one where I was the protagonist, not a footnote. And as I packed my bags for winter break, preparing for both Christmas at home and New Year's with friends, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not for a perfect family or a fairy tale reconciliation, but for a future where I could love them without losing myself. The Hawaii trip had been postponed for me, but in its place, something far more valuable had begun. My journey toward claiming my own worth, my own space, my own joy. Sometimes the deepest betrayals become unexpected gifts, forcing us to confront truths we've been avoiding and make changes we've been resisting. My family had gone to Hawaii without me, leaving me behind with a lie. But in doing so, they had inadvertently sent me on a different journey altogether. One that led not to some tropical paradise, but to the far more meaningful destination of self-discovery. And that was a trip no one could postpone or take away from me. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, red-eyed and exhausted, Jen took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened?" she asked, immediately setting aside her textbook. I wordlessly handed her my phone, open to Ryan's Instagram feed. She scrolled through the photos, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to outrage. "They went without you? After telling you it was postponed?" Her voice rose with each question. "Who does that?" "My family, apparently," I said, the words hollow in my chest. Jen shook her head, handing the phone back to me. "That's not just disappointing, Cassie. That's cruel. Cruel." The word hung in the air between us. I'd never thought of my family as cruel before. Distracted, yes. Preoccupied with my siblings, definitely. But cruel implied intent, a deliberate decision to hurt me. Was that what this was? I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake watching as more photos appeared online. My sister Megan at a sunset luau. My brother Ryan cliff diving. My parents renewing their vows on the beach at sunrise. A surprise ceremony I hadn't even known they were planning. Each new image was another dagger to my heart. Another piece of evidence that they'd created an entire vacation narrative that deliberately excluded me. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The shock had crystallized into a cold, clear anger. Not the hot, reactive kind that burns out quickly, but something deeper and more resolved. They had made a choice, and now I would make mine. I drafted countless messages. Tearful ones begging for explanations, raging ones demanding accountability, coldly formal ones declaring my hurt. But in the end, I deleted them all. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I blocked them all on social media. Not out of spite, though perhaps there was a small part of me that wanted them to feel a fraction of the exclusion I felt. Mostly, it was self-preservation. I couldn't heal while watching them build memories without. Me couldn't move forward while being constantly reminded of what I'd been denied. For the next week, I went through finals on autopilot. I aced every exam because academics had always been my refuge, the one place where effort reliably translated to results. Inside, though, I felt hollow. Like something fundamental had been carved out of me. It was during my cell biology final that I had an epiphany. We were analyzing how cells respond to trauma, how they repair, adapt, or sometimes undergo apoptosis, a kind of programmed cell death that allows the larger organism to survive. Maybe that's what I needed, to let some part of me die, the part that had always accommodated, always understood, always made excuses for being overlooked. After my last exam, I went straight to my academic advisor's office. Dr. Martinez looked up from her computer, surprised to see me. "Cassie, I thought you'd be halfway to Hawaii by now." I managed a tight smile. "Change of plans." I sat down across from her desk. "Remember that summer research opportunity you mentioned? Is it still available?" She shuffled through some papers. "The marine biology project? Yes, but I thought you couldn't do it because of your family vacation." "I'm suddenly very available," I said, my voice steady, "and very interested." Dr. Martinez studied me for a moment, clearly sensing there was more to the story, but professional enough not to pry. "Well, it's a fantastic opportunity. You'd be working directly with Dr. Reyes at the Coastal Research Station. The stipend isn't huge, but housing is provided." "I want it," I said with a certainty I hadn't felt in days. "I'll make the call," she promised. When I left her office, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd taken the first step on a new path. My family had chosen to exclude me from their Hawaiian adventure, but in doing so, they'd unintentionally freed me to pursue something that might actually matter more in the long run. My phone started filling with missed calls and text messages the day they returned from their postponed trip. I let them all go to voicemail, let the texts pile up unread. I wasn't ready yet. I needed time to process, to decide what I wanted this confrontation to look like. Because there would be a confrontation. For once in my life, I wouldn't smooth things over, wouldn't pretend it was fine, wouldn't be the one to repair the damage they'd caused. "The art of war says to choose your battleground," said Lynn, my study group partner, when I confided in her over coffee. "Don't let them ambush you with a tearful apology when you're not prepared. Decide where and when you'll address this." She was right. I'd spent too much of my life being reactive, responding to the family dynamics created around me rather than asserting my own needs. This time would be different. I decided to meet them at our family home the weekend after they returned. I needed to see their faces when I confronted them, needed to watch their expressions when they realized I knew what they'd done. Most importantly, I needed to be able to walk away when I was finished. No trapped feeling of being stuck in someone else's space. The drive home that Saturday was surreal. The familiar suburban streets seemed unchanged, while I felt fundamentally different. The person turning onto Maple Avenue wasn't the same one who had left for college last fall. That Cassie had been eager to please, desperate for approval, willing to accommodate any slight for the sake of family harmony. This Cassie had boundaries. I parked in the driveway behind my dad's SUV and sat for a moment, steeling myself. Through the living room window, I could see them all. Mom arranging flowers in a vase, Dad reading the newspaper, Ryan playing some game on his phone, Megan texting while sprawled across the couch. A perfect family tableau, minus one daughter. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. No turning back now. Mom was the first to spot me when I walked in unannounced. Her face lit up with surprise and what appeared to be genuine joy. "Cassie, what are you doing here? We've been trying to reach you for days." She rushed forward for a hug. I stepped back, just slightly. enough that her arms fell awkwardly to her sides. "Have you?" I asked, my voice neutral. Dad looked up from his paper. "Hey, kiddo. Good to see you. How were finals?" The casual way he asked, as if nothing was wrong, as if they hadn't just betrayed me in the most fundamental way, made something snap inside me. "Finals were fine," I said. "How was Hawaii?" The room went silent. Mom's smile froze. Dad's newspaper lowered slowly. Ryan and Megan exchanged glances. "What?" I pressed, looking around at each of them. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Mom recovered first, a nervous laugh escaping her. "Cassie, we can explain." "Can you?" I cut her off. "Can you really explain why you told me our family trip was postponed due to money problems and then went anyway without me?" "It's complicated," Dad started. "No," I said, my voice sharp. "It's actually very simple. You lied to me. You excluded me from a family vacation I'd been looking forward to for a year. You made memories without me and never intended to tell me the truth." "That's not fair," Ryan interjected. "It wasn't like we were trying to hurt you." I turned to him, eyebrow raised. "Then what exactly were you trying to do, Ryan? Because posting photos with captions about family time when 1/5 of your family isn't there seems pretty deliberate to me." He had the decency to look ashamed. "We thought," Mom began, then faltered. "With your internship coming up, we assumed you wouldn't be able to go anyway." "You assumed," I repeated. "You didn't ask me. You didn't give me the choice. You decided for me, just like you've always decided for me." "Cassie, please." Dad stood up, his voice taking on that placating tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "It wasn't personal." "Not personal?" I laughed, the sound brittle, even to my own ears. "How is excluding me from a family vacation not personal?" "You're always so busy with school," Megan chimed in, as if this explained everything. "You probably wouldn't have had fun anyway." I stared at my sister, momentarily speechless. "So, because I take my education seriously, I don't deserve to be included in family activities? Is that really your defense here?" "That's not what she meant," Mom said quickly. "Then what did she mean? What did any of you mean by this?" I gestured to all of them. "Because from where I'm standing, the message is pretty clear. I'm not a priority in this family. I never have been." The silence that followed was deafening. No one rushed to contradict me, to insist that of course I was a priority. Of course I mattered just as much as Ryan or Megan. Their silence confirmed what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. "Cassie," Mom finally said, her voice soft, "we love you." "Love isn't enough," I replied, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "Not when it isn't backed by actions, by consideration, by basic respect." "What do you want us to say?" Dad asked, frustration edging into his tone. "We made a mistake. We're sorry." "Are you?" I challenged. "Are you sorry you did it? Or just sorry I found out?" More silence. The truth hung in the air between us. "If I hadn't seen Ryan's Instagram posts," I continued, "would you have ever told me the truth? Or would you have come home with your tans and your souvenirs and pretended the trip really was postponed?" No one answered. They didn't need to. I already knew. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. I turned to leave, but Mom grabbed my arm. "Cassie, wait. Don't go like this. Let's talk about it. I've said everything I needed to say, I replied, gently but firmly removing her hand. So that's it? Dad's voice rose. You're just going to walk out? That's not how we resolve things in this family. I turned back to face him, a sad smile on my lips. That's the problem, Dad. We don't resolve things in this family. We pretend they didn't happen. We paper over them. We move on without addressing the real issues. But I can't do that anymore. What does that mean? Mom asked, fear creeping into her voice. It means I'm done being the afterthought. I'm done making it easy for you to exclude me. I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt when you prioritize everyone else. Ryan stood up, suddenly looking concerned. Come on, Cass, you're overreacting. It was just a vacation. No, I said firmly. It wasn't just a vacation. It was a symptom of something that's been happening my entire life. I've always been the responsible one, the low-maintenance one, the one who doesn't make waves. And because of that, I've been consistently overlooked, consistently taken for granted, consistently treated as less important than the rest of you. Megan rolled her eyes. So dramatic. It's not like we never do anything for you. When? I challenged. When was the last time this family rearranged plans for something that mattered to me? When was the last time my achievements were celebrated with the same enthusiasm as Ryan's games or your dance recitals? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to answer. I have never, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion, welling in my chest, never once asked any of you to sacrifice for me the way I've sacrificed for this family. All I've ever wanted was to be valued equally, to be considered equally, to be loved equally, and that hasn't happened. Mom was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. Dad looked like someone had punched him. Ryan and Megan seemed genuinely shocked, as if they'd never considered how their charmed family life might look from my perspective. I have a summer research position at the coastal station, I said, breaking the heavy silence. I'll be living there until fall semester starts. Research? Mom wiped at her tears. But what about coming home for the summer? We always spend summers together. The irony of her statement, given what had just happened, wasn't lost on any of us. Not this summer, I said simply. Cassie, please. Dad tried again. We made a mistake. A big one. But don't throw away your relationship with your family over one bad decision. I looked at him sadly. It's not one bad decision, Dad. It's a pattern. A pattern I've tolerated for too long because I thought that's what it meant to be part of a family, to subordinate my needs to everyone else's. But I see now that it's supposed to go both ways, and with us, it never has. What do you want? From us? Mom asked, her voice small. It was a good question. What did I want? Revenge? No. Groveling apologies? Not really. What I wanted was something much simpler, yet much harder to achieve. I want you to see me, I said finally. Really? See me? Not as the responsible oldest child who doesn't need attention. Not as the academic who doesn't need celebration. Not as the accommodating daughter who will always understand when she's put last. I want you to see me as a full person with needs, and feelings and a life that matters just as much as anyone else's in this family. We do see you, Mom insisted. No, I shook my head. You don't. If you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I turned toward the door again, but paused, one last thought forming. I'm not cutting you off, I said, looking back at their stricken faces. I'm not saying I don't want to be part of this family anymore. I'm just saying I need space to figure out who I am outside of the role I've been playing for all of you. And you need time to decide if you're willing to make room for that person, the real me, not just the convenient version you've come to rely on. With that, I walked out, closing the door quietly behind me. No dramatic slam, no tearful last looks, just a deliberate step into a new chapter of my life. In my car, I expected to feel raging or bereft. Instead, I felt strangely calm, even empowered. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, had articulated my needs without apology, had refused to accept less than I deserved. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. As I drove away from the house that had never quite felt like it belonged equally to me, my phone started buzzing with messages. I ignored them all. They'd had their say. I'd had mine. What came next would depend on actions, not words. The Coastal Research Station was a revelation. Situated on a rugged stretch of shoreline 3 hours from my hometown, it was a cluster of weathered buildings housing laboratories, dormitories, and common spaces. Dr. Reyes, a brilliant marine biologist with a no-nonsense demeanor, assigned me to help with her study on the impact of microplastics on coastal ecosystems. The work is demanding, she warned on my first day. Physical, intellectual, emotional. The ocean doesn't care about your feelings, but it will teach you about resilience if you're willing to learn. I nodded, thinking how perfectly her words applied to my current life situation. I'm ready to learn. The days quickly fell into a rhythm. Early mornings collecting samples along the shore, afternoons processing data in the lab, evenings spent in passionate discussions with other researchers about climate change, conservation, and the future of our oceans. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued the same things I did, who saw my intelligence as an asset rather than an inconvenience, who celebrated achievements based on merit rather than favoritism. 2 weeks into my stay, I finally read my family's messages. There were dozens: apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness, demands for response. Some seemed genuine. Others felt like attempts to manage the situation without really addressing the underlying issues. Mom, Cassie, please call us. We're so sorry. We never meant to hurt you. Dad, kiddo, I know we messed up. Let's talk this through like adults. Ryan, hey sis, I feel awful about posting those pics. Should have thought about how you'd feel. Megan, this is ridiculous. You're punishing everyone over one mistake. So childish. I read each one carefully, then set my phone aside without responding. Not out of malice, but because I still didn't know what to say. How do you address a lifetime of subtle inequities in a text message? How do you rebuild trust through words? Alone? Instead, I focused on my work, immersing myself in the study of something larger than my family drama. There was something healing about the ocean's vastness, its indifference to human concerns, its constant movement and renewal. The tides came in and went out, regardless of who was watching, who was hurting, who was happy. There was wisdom in that relentlessness. Dr. Reyes noticed my dedication. You're good at this, she remarked one evening as we calibrated testing equipment. Most undergrads are just checking a box for their resume, but you're actually present in the work. It matters, I said simply. What we're doing here matters. She studied me for a moment. What happened to make you realize that? I looked up, surprised by the personal question from my usually reserved mentor. Sometimes, I said carefully, you have to lose what you thought was important to discover what actually is. She nodded, seeming to understand more than I'd said. The ocean teaches us that too. What looks like destruction, waves crashing, shores eroding, is often just transformation. Her words stayed with me that night as I sat on the research station's small deck, watching moonlight ripple across the water. Maybe this painful episode with my family wasn't just an ending, but a transformation. The erosion of old patterns making way for something new to form. The next morning, I called my mom. "Cassie?" She answered on the first ring, her voice thick, with emotion. "Oh, thank God. We've been so worried." "I'm fine," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I've been busy with my research." "Are you still angry with us?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm not angry anymore," I replied truthfully. "But I haven't forgotten either. We've been talking about what you said," she continued, her words rushing out as if she feared I might hang up. "About how we've made you feel overlooked. I never realized. I guess I just thought because you were so capable, so independent, that you didn't need us the way Ryan and Megan did. Everyone needs to feel valued, Mom. Even capable, independent people." A pause. "I know that now," she said quietly. "I should have known it all along." We talked for nearly an hour. Not just about Hawaii, but about patterns stretching back. Years, missed events, forgotten achievements, diminished milestones. She didn't deny any of it, didn't make excuses, just listened and acknowledged. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were moments of defensiveness, moments of frustration on both sides. But it was honest in a way our interactions had rarely been before. "We'd like to come visit you," she said near the end of the call. "See your work, meet your colleagues, if that's okay." I hesitated. Was I ready to let them into this new space I'd created for myself? Would their presence bring old dynamics back into play? "Not yet," I said finally. "I need more time." To her credit, she accepted my boundary without protest. "We'll be here when you're ready." That call was the first step in a slow, sometimes painful process of redefining my relationship with my family. Over the following weeks, we had more conversations. Some productive, some frustrating, all necessary. Dad apologized in his own gruff way, acknowledging that he'd never given my accomplishments the same weight as my siblings. Ryan, surprisingly, became an ally, making consistent efforts to include me in family news and check on my well-being. Only Megan struggled to understand the depth of what had happened. "You're getting so much attention now," she complained during one phone call. "It's like everything has to be about you suddenly." "It's not about getting attention," I tried to explain. "It's about being treated with equal consideration." "Whatever," she muttered. "I just want things to go back to normal." "They can't," I said firmly. "And they shouldn't." By midsummer, something had shifted. The text messages from my family had changed from desperate pleas for forgiveness to genuine inquiries about my life, my work, my thoughts. They'd begun, however imperfectly, to see me as a person rather than a role. One evening, Dr. Reyes found me in the lab, analyzing water samples after hours. "Your dedication is commendable," she said, "but there's more to life than work, you know." I smiled ruefully. "That's rich, coming from you." She laughed, conceding the point. "I'm a cautionary tale, not a role model." She perched on a lab stool. The ocean will still be here tomorrow. Go watch the sunset. Call someone who matters to you. Remember why we're fighting to save all this. I thought about her words as I walked along the shore that evening, phone in hand. The sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Without overthinking it, I took a photo and sent it to my family's group chat, the first message I'd initiated since our confrontation. The view from my research station tonight, I wrote simply. The responses came almost immediately. Dad. Magnificent. Nature at its finest. Ryan. Killer sunset. Almost as good as your killer research, I bet. Mom. Beautiful. Just like you, sweetheart. And finally, Megan. Wish I could see it in person. Miss you, even though you're still being weird. I smiled at my sister's characteristically blunt message. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And maybe that was the point. Real relationships weren't perfect. They were complicated, messy, constantly evolving. The question wasn't whether my family would ever be flawless, but whether we could build something authentic from the wreckage of false harmony. As I watched the last sliver of sun slip below the horizon, I made a decision. I typed out a new message to the group chat. Visitor weekend is July 15th, 17. If you're interested in seeing what I've been working on, you're welcome to come. It was a small step, but a significant one. Not a return to old patterns, but an invitation to something new. A relationship where I had agency, where my boundaries were respected, where my life and work were valued. The ocean before me continued, its eternal rhythm, waves breaking and receding, breaking and receding. Dr. Reyes was right. What looked like destruction was often transformation. The painful break with my family had been necessary, creating space for something healthier to grow in its place. As darkness fell and stars began to appear above the water, my phone lit up with excited responses to my invitation. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of cautious hope. Not that everything would be magically fixed, but that we were all, finally, willing to do the work of real connection. The Hawaii betrayal had broken something fundamental between us. But in that, breaking, seeds of something more authentic had been planted. Whether they would flourish remained to be seen. But I was ready for the journey, not as the accommodating daughter I'd always been, but as the woman I was becoming, strong, clear-eyed, and unwilling to settle for less than I deserved. True, transformation, I was learning, wasn't about dramatic gestures or perfect outcomes. It was about small, consistent choices, about courage in quiet moments, about refusing to revert to comfortable patterns that no longer served. It was hard work, harder in many ways than the scientific research I was conducting, but it was necessary work. As I walked back to the research station under a sky brilliant with stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. The Hawaii trip that should have included me had instead sent me on a different journey altogether, one with greater challenges but also greater rewards, one that was teaching me not just about oceanography but about myself, and that was a discovery worth making. The coastal research station became my sanctuary that summer. Perched on a rugged clifftop overlooking the Pacific, it was a world away from the suburban comfort of my family home, both physically and emotionally. The cluster of weathered buildings housed an international team of scientists, graduate students, and a few select undergrads like me, all dedicated to understanding and protecting the ocean. My first week there passed in a blur of new routines. I rose before dawn to help collect water samples, spent afternoons processing data in the lab, and evenings discussing research findings with my new colleagues. The work was demanding, sometimes frustrating, but deeply fulfilling in a way I'd never experienced before. Here, my academic focus wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated, expected, essential. Dr. Reyes, my research supervisor, was unlike anyone I'd ever met. A brilliant marine biologist in her 50s with salt and pepper hair perpetually escaping from a messy bun, she had the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in the sun and wind. Her reputation for brilliance was matched only by her reputation for bluntness. "Your analysis is incomplete," she told me on my fourth day, tossing my report back across the lab table. "You're looking at the data but not seeing the story it's telling." I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, "Don't apologize," she cut me off. "Do better. You have the capability. I wouldn't have accepted you otherwise. But you're holding back, playing it safe." She fixed me with a penetrating gaze. "The ocean doesn't reward caution, Cassie. Neither does science. Neither does life." I stayed late that night, revisiting my analysis, pushing beyond the obvious conclusions to find the connections I'd missed. When I finally emerged from this lab at midnight, the full moon was casting a silver path across the water, and something had shifted inside me. Dr. Reyes wasn't just teaching me about marine ecology. She was teaching me how to trust my own mind, to push boundaries, to demand more of myself than anyone else ever had. Meanwhile, my phone continued to fill with messages from my family. I'd read them all now, but still hadn't responded. Their tone had evolved over the weeks, from confusion to concern, to a dawning realization that this silence wasn't temporary. "Mom, Cassie, please just let us know you're safe. We're worried sick." "Dad, your mother hasn't been sleeping. At least send a text to let us know you're okay." Ryan, "Hey, this has gone on long enough. They get it. They messed up. You're being kind. Of harsh, don't you think?" Megan, "Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now you're just being dramatic." Their messages revealed so much about the dynamics I'd finally escaped. My parents' concern wrapped in guilt trips. Ryan's casual dismissal of my feelings. Megan's impatience with anything that disrupted her world. For the first time, I could see these patterns clearly, without the fog of desperate belonging that had clouded my vision for so long. It was Luna, one of the graduate students at the station, who finally prompted me to respond. We were sitting on the cliffs one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, when I mentioned my family situation. "So, you're giving them the silent treatment?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not that simple," I protested. "Isn't it?" She tossed a pebble over the edge, watching it disappear into the waves below. "Look, I get it. They hurt you. They deserve to feel some consequences. But complete silence?" She shook her head. "That's not a boundary, Cassie. That's a wall." "What's the difference?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Boundaries are permeable," she explained. "They protect you while still allowing connection. Walls isolate. They might keep pain out, but they also keep growth out." She gave me a knowing look. "And from what you've told me, you're the one who's always grown in that family. Don't stop now." That night I sent a simple text to my parents. "I'm safe and doing well at my research position. I need space right now, but I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." Their responses were immediate and effusive, full of relief and questions and pleas for more communication. I didn't respond further. One text wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall, enough to let them know I wasn't lost to them, just changing the terms of our relationship. As June turned to July, I fell into a rhythm at the research station. The work was challenging and constantly evolving. One week, we were tracking microplastic concentrations in tide pools. The next, we were monitoring the behavioral patterns of a pod of dolphins that frequented our coastline. The common thread was purpose. Everything we did mattered, contributing to a larger understanding of our oceans and how to protect them. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who operated like I did, intensely focused, intellectually curious, driven by something larger than personal gain or family approval. We worked hard, but we also formed genuine connections. Weekend barbecues on the beach, late-night stargazing sessions, fierce debates over research methodologies that sometimes devolved into laughter. This was a different kind of belonging than I'd ever known. "You're different here," observed Marcus, a fellow undergrad from Berkeley, as we cataloged seaweed samples one afternoon. "More alive somehow." I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "When you first arrived, you were so contained, like you were trying to take up as little space as possible. Now you argue with Dr. Reyes, you crack jokes, you get excited about weird algae formations." He grinned. "You've expanded." His observation stayed with me. Had I really been so diminished before? Had my family's patterns shaped me into someone who instinctively made herself small to accommodate others' largeness? That evening, Dr. Reyes asked me to join her for a walk along the shore. As we picked our way across the rocky beach, the setting sun casting long shadows, she broached a subject I hadn't expected. "The summer session ends in 3 weeks," she said matter-of-factly. "What are your plans after that?" I hesitated. The truth was, I hadn't thought beyond this sanctuary. "I guess I'll head back to campus, prepare for fall semester." She nodded, kicking at a piece of driftwood. "Or you could stay." "Stay?" I echoed, not sure I'd heard correctly. "I have funding for a research assistant through December. The work gets more interesting in the fall. Storm patterns, changing migration behaviors, seasonal shifts in the ecosystem." She glanced at me. "You have a good mind, Cassie. Sharp, methodical, but also intuitive. I could use someone like you on my team." My heart raced at the opportunity. Extended time at the research station, working directly with Dr. Reyes, diving deeper into the work that had become so meaningful to me. But it would mean not returning home before school started, extending my separation from my family through the entire summer and beyond. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course." She smiled, a rare expression on her usually stern face. "But don't overthink it. Sometimes the right path is the one that scares you a little." Back in my small dormitory room, I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone. For the first time in weeks, I dialed my mom's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice breathless with surprise. "Cassie? Oh my goodness, is that really you?" "It's me, Mom," I said quietly. "We've been so worried. Are you okay? When are you coming home? We've been—" "Mom," I interrupted gently. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm calling because I've been offered an extended position here through December." Silence stretched across the line. Then, carefully, "So you wouldn't be coming home before school starts?" "No, I'd stay here, then go directly back to campus in January." Another pause. "I see." The disappointment in her voice was palpable. "It's an amazing opportunity," I continued. "Dr. Reyes is one of the top researchers in her field, and she specifically wants me on her team." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, her voice strained with the effort of sounding supportive. "Of course we're proud of you. We just miss you." 5 months ago, that hint of guilt would have been enough to make me reconsider, to put my opportunity second to my family's desires. But something had shifted in me. "I miss you too," I said, surprised to find it was true. Despite everything, these people were still my family. But this is important to me. I'm doing meaningful work here. More meaningful than reconnecting with your family? The question slipped out, revealing the heart of her hurt. "It's not a competition, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "I can do important work and still be part of this family. But things need to change between us for that to happen." "What things?" she asked, a defensive edge creeping into her tone. I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I'd been avoiding, the one that required me to clearly articulate what I needed instead of just reacting to what I didn't want. "I need to be seen," I said simply. "Not as the responsible oldest child who never needs attention. Not as the academic success who doesn't need celebration. Not as the accommodating daughter who will always understand when she's put last. I need to be seen as a full person with dreams and needs that matter just as much as Ryan's or Megan's." Mom was quiet for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I never meant to make you feel less important," she whispered. "I know," I said, and I did. My parents hadn't set out to create such unbalanced family dynamics. They'd simply fallen into patterns that worked for them, never realizing the cost. To me. But intentions don't change the impact. "So where do we go from here?" she asked. And I was struck by how uncertain she sounded. My mother, who had always seemed so sure of everything. "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "But I think it starts with me doing what's right for me for once. Without guilt, and with all of you respecting that choice." "And if we want to visit, see your work, meet these people who are so important to you?" The question surprised me. I had expected resistance, not accommodation. That might be nice, actually. Later in the summer, when I'm more settled, we talked for nearly an hour. About my research, about life at the station, even briefly about Hawaii. Though that wound was still too fresh to probe deeply, it wasn't a perfect conversation. Old patterns threatened to emerge several times, but we both caught ourselves, adjusting course toward something more balanced, more honest. By the time we hung up, I had accepted Dr. Reyes's offer and set tentative dates for my family to visit in August. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was movement in that direction. Cautious steps toward a new kind of relationship built on mutual respect, rather than predetermined roles. The weeks that followed were transformative. With the decision to stay through December, I threw myself even more fully into the research, taking on additional responsibilities and earning Dr. Reyes's grudging praise. "You're becoming a real scientist," she told me one day, which from her was the highest compliment imaginable. My relationship with my family evolved in fits and starts. Some days brought encouraging signs, my dad sending articles related to marine conservation, Ryan asking thoughtful questions about my research, even Megan admitting she'd defended me when a family friend asked why I wasn't home for the summer. Other days revealed how deeply entrenched our old patterns were. My mom still occasionally slipped into guilt trips. My dad still sometimes dismissed my work as playing in tide pools, and Ryan and Megan still expected me to drop everything when they wanted to talk about their problems. The difference was that now I recognized these patterns and had the courage to address them directly. "That feels like a guilt trip, Mom," I would say calmly. Or, "Dad, my research isn't a hobby. It's contributing to published scientific literature." Or, "Ryan, I'm in the middle of something important. Can we talk tomorrow?" Setting these boundaries wasn't easy. There were tears, mostly my mom's, arguments, mostly with Megan, and uncomfortable silences, my dad's specialty. But beneath the discomfort, something important was happening. They were starting to see me, truly see me, perhaps for the first time. As the date of their visit approached, I found myself both excited and apprehensive. Would the progress we'd made over phone calls and texts hold up in person? Would they respect this new life I'd built, or try to pull me back into old dynamics? The day before their arrival, Luna found me triple-checking the visitor accommodations, making sure everything was perfect. "You know," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "They're the ones who should be nervous, not you." I looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "They're entering your world now," she explained. "A world where everyone already values you for exactly who you are. Where you're respected and appreciated without having to earn it or beg for it." She smiled. "That's going to be more uncomfortable for them than it is for you." She was right, I realized. The research station had become my domain, a place where I was valued for my mind, my work ethic, my contributions. I didn't have to compete for attention here or diminish myself to fit in. I belonged, effortlessly and completely. When my family's rental car pulled up the dusty drive the next afternoon, I was waiting on the porch of the main building, calm and centered in a way I'd never been around them before. They tumbled out of the car looking tired from the long drive but eager, my mom scanning the grounds with curious eyes, my dad already examining the research vessels moored at the small dock, Ryan and Megan stretching and checking their phones. Mom spotted me first, her face lighting up. "Cassie!" she called, hurrying forward. I met her halfway, accepting her embrace but not disappearing into it as I once would have. "Welcome to Cape Meridian Research Station," I said, stepping back with a smile that encompassed all of them. "I'm glad you could come." The next 3 days were a revelation, for all of us. I showed them my work, the laboratory where I processed samples, the tide pools where we conducted our field studies, the data center where our findings became part of larger research initiatives. I introduced them to my colleagues, including Dr. Reyes, who surprised me by being uncharacteristically warm and complimentary about my contributions. "Your daughter has a remarkable mind," she told my parents over dinner the first night. "She's already contributing to a paper we're publishing next year." The pride on my parents' faces was genuine, but so was their surprise, as if they were just discovering that the daughter they'd raised was actually someone quite extraordinary. "We always knew Cassie was smart," my dad said, "but we had no idea she was doing work at this level." "Because you never asked," I said quietly, not accusing, just stating a fact. A flash of hurt crossed his face, followed by something deeper, recognition, perhaps. "You're right," he admitted. "We should have." That moment of honesty opened the door to more. During a sunset walk along the cliffs, my mom confessed that she'd always favored Ryan and Megan because they'd seemed to need more. "You were so capable, so self-sufficient," she explained. "I thought that meant you needed me less." I see now that was wrong. On the second day, Ryan joined me for an early morning sample collection, waking at 5 a.m. without complaint. As we worked together in companionable silence, the sun just beginning to crest the horizon, he suddenly said, "I get it now." "Get what?" I asked, carefully labeling a specimen jar. "Why you love it here." He gestured at the dramatic coastline, the endless ocean, the research vessel bobbing in the distance. "It's like you matter here. What you do matters." I glanced at him, surprised by his perception. "Yes, exactly." He seemed to struggle with his next words. "I never realized you didn't feel that way at home." "I didn't," I confirmed. "Not for a long time." "I'm sorry," he said, and the simple sincerity of it nearly brought tears to my eyes. I should have seen it. Even Megan, always the most resistant to change, had a breakthrough during their visit. I found her sitting alone on the beach on their last evening, staring out at the ocean with an uncharacteristically pensive expression. "Everything okay?" I asked, dropping down beside her in the sand. She shrugged. "Just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," I teased. She smiled faintly, then surprised me by saying, "You belong here." "I do," I agreed. "I always thought you were just going through the motions back home," she continued. "Like, doing well in school and being responsible was just what you did, not who you were." She picked up a shell, turning it over in her hands. "But seeing you here, this is who you are. And we never saw it." "No," I said gently. "You didn't." She threw the shell toward the water, watching it disappear into the waves. "I'm jealous," she admitted. "Of what?" "That you found your place, your people." She glanced at me. "I'm still trying to figure out where I fit. For the first time in our lives, I saw my sister not as the favored youngest child who had everything handed to her, but as someone struggling with her own journey, her own questions of identity and belonging. "You will," I told her. "And when you do, I'll come visit and see it for myself." She smiled, a real smile this time. "Promise?" "Promise." The morning they left, something had shifted between us. Not a complete transformation. There were still awkward moments, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves, uncertainties about where we went from here. But the foundation had changed. They had seen me in my element, respected my work, begun to understand the person I was becoming rather than clinging to the role I'd always played. As they packed the car, my dad pulled me aside. "We're proud of you, Cassie," he said gruffly. "Not just for the work you're doing, but for standing up for yourself. It couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I acknowledged. "I wish you hadn't." "Had to," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I wish we'd seen it ourselves, how we were treating you." He looked me directly in the eyes. "We'll do better. I'll do better." "I know you will," I said, and was surprised to find I believed it. As their car disappeared down the dusty road, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the visit was over, yes, but also a sense of cautious hope. For the first time, my family had seen me as I truly was, not the convenient version of myself I'd always presented to them, but the real Cassie with her passions, her boundaries, her remarkable mind. That night, I sat on the cliffs watching the stars emerge above the endless ocean. Luna joined me, passing me a mug of hot chocolate. "So?" she prompted. "How was it?" I considered the question carefully. "Challenging," I said finally. healing, unfinished. She nodded, understanding. Family always is. They're trying, I continued. Really trying, maybe for the first time. And that's enough for now? I thought about the months ahead. The extended research position, the return to campus in January, the holidays I'd tentatively agreed to spend with them. The journey we were on wasn't a straight line toward perfect reconciliation. It was messier than that, with steps forward and back, old hurts resurfacing, new understandings emerging. It's a start, I said, and lifted my face to the vast, star-filled sky, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon. The complicated, imperfect love of family, transformed but not diminished by our journey. The betrayal of the Hawaii trip had cracked open something long festering in our family dynamic. The painful truth was that sometimes such breaking is necessary. Only by shattering old patterns can we create space for something healthier to grow. As a marine biologist in training, I understood this principle deeply. The tides that erode coastlines also create new habitats. The storms that destroy also regenerate. Nature's harshest moments often lead to its most beautiful transformations. My family was learning this lesson too. The comfortable patterns that had served some of us while diminishing others were being painfully, necessarily dismantled. In their place, something more balanced was tentatively emerging. A family where each member was seen and valued not for the role they played, but for the person they truly were. It wouldn't be perfect. Old habits would reassert themselves. New challenges would arise. But we had begun the journey toward something authentic, and that alone was worth celebrating. As the stars wheeled overhead and the ocean continued its eternal rhythm below, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never again make myself small to fit into someone else's story. The research station had shown me what it felt like to be valued precisely for who I was, without conditions or comparisons. I deserved nothing less from the people who claimed to love me most. Dr. Reyes joined us on the cliffs, her weathered face thoughtful in the starlight. The dolphins were back today, she commented. The pod we've been tracking. They've established a new migration pattern. Adapting to changing conditions, I noted. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Life finds a way, doesn't it? Even when the familiar paths are blocked, new ones emerge. I thought of my family driving home, our relationship fundamentally altered but somehow stronger for having been tested. Yes, I agreed. It does. The Hawaii trip my family had taken without me had sent me on a different journey altogether. One not marked by tourist attractions and souvenir photos, but by profound personal growth and newfound strength. It wasn't the path I would have chosen, but standing here now, surrounded by meaningful work and authentic connections, I couldn't regret where it had led me. Sometimes the deepest wounds become our greatest teachers. Sometimes exclusion leads to belonging of a truer kind. Sometimes betrayal becomes the catalyst for transformation so profound we barely recognize our former selves. This was my truth, written in the stars above and the waves below. I was enough, exactly as I was, and I would never settle for being treated as anything less again. The December wind whipped across the research station, carrying the sharp scent of salt and the promise of an approaching storm. I stood at the edge of the cliff, watching massive waves crash against the rocks below, feeling both exhilarated and melancholy. Tomorrow, after 6 transformative months at Cape Meridian, I would be leaving, returning to campus for the spring semester, my extended research position complete. Going to miss this view, huh? I turned to find Dr. Reyes beside me, her silver hair wild in the wind, a steaming mug clutched in her weathered hands. Among other things, I admitted, accepting the coffee she offered. She gazed out at the churning ocean. You know, when you first arrived here, I wasn't sure you'd last a week. You were so contained, like you were afraid to take up space. I smiled, remembering how overwhelmed I'd felt those first days. I was. And now? She turned those sharp eyes on me, the eyes that missed nothing, not in data, not in people. Now I know exactly how much space I deserve, I said, with a certainty that would have been impossible 6 months ago. She nodded, satisfied. That's the real research you conducted here, Cassie. Not just on microplastics or dolphin migration patterns, but on yourself. We stood in companionable silence, watching the waves. This woman had become more than a supervisor to me. She was a mentor, a guide who had pushed me to discover strengths I hadn't known I possessed. I submitted your name for the Coastal Preservation Fellowship, she said abruptly. I nearly spilled my coffee. The CPF? But that's for graduate students. Usually, she conceded. But your work on microplastic accumulation patterns is publication-worthy. The foundation makes exceptions for exceptional undergraduates. My mind raced. The Coastal Preservation Fellowship was prestigious, offering substantial funding and unparalleled research opportunities. When would I hear? March, probably. She gave me a rare smile. Whatever happens, you've earned the nomination. Remember that. As I packed my small dormitory room that evening, I reflected on Dr. Reyes's words. I had earned this, not by diminishing myself or accommodating others, but by claiming my talents, my passion, my worth. The realization felt profound, a foundation upon which to build whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Safe travels tomorrow. Call when you get settled on campus. We love you. Simple words, but they represented such progress. No guilt trips, no demands, just support. And space, exactly what I'd asked for. Our relationship had transformed over these months, not dramatically but incrementally, through consistent small choices on both sides. The family visit in August had been a turning point. Seeing me in my element, respected, valued, thriving, had shifted something fundamental in their perception. For the first time, they had glimpsed the real Cassie, not just the convenient role I'd played in our family dynamics. The changes weren't perfect or complete. Old patterns still emerged sometimes, but now we recognized them, addressed them, worked to correct them. My parents made genuine efforts to engage with my work and interests. My siblings, especially Ryan, showed newfound respect for my boundaries and choices. Most importantly, I had changed. I no longer contorted myself to fit their expectations, or diminished my needs to maintain peace. I spoke my truth, firmly but compassionately. I claimed my space without apology. When Thanksgiving approached, I'd made another decision that reflected this growth. Instead of automatically joining family festivities, I accepted an invitation from Luna and several other research colleagues to celebrate at the station. It wasn't a rejection of my family, but an affirmation of these new important relationships. My parents had been disappointed but understanding. "We miss you," Dad had said during our weekly call, "but we get it. These people are your family too now." That simple acknowledgement that I could have multiple meaningful communities, multiple places of belonging, felt like a gift. The old Cassie would have sacrificed her preferences to meet their expectations. The new Cassie could make choices based on her own needs without severing family bonds. Now, as December ended and a new year approached, I faced another milestone. Christmas with my family, my first extended visit home since the Hawaii revelation. I was nervous, but also hopeful, curious to see how our new dynamics would translate in the old familiar setting of our family home. The drive from campus to my hometown took 4 hours, giving me plenty of time to reflect on the path that had led me here. 6 months ago, I had discovered my family's betrayal through an Instagram post, a brutal awakening to patterns of inequality I had long tolerated. The pain had been acute, but necessary, pushing me toward growth I might otherwise have avoided. For years. As I pulled into our driveway on December 23rd, I felt a complex mix of emotions: nostalgia, apprehension, curiosity, love. The house looked exactly as it always had during the holidays, festooned with twinkling lights and the slightly crooked star Dad insisted on placing atop the front yard pine tree every year. Yet I was different, and that changed everything. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up. "Cassie, you're here." She stepped forward for a hug, then hesitated, respecting the physical boundaries I'd established over recent months. I smiled and initiated the embrace myself, holding her tightly for a moment. "Hi, Mom. How was the drive? Are you hungry? Your room is all ready and—" She caught herself midstream, laughing softly. "Sorry, I'm just really happy to see you." "I'm happy to see you too," I said, surprised to find how true it was. Despite everything, this was still my mother, still someone I loved deeply. Inside, delicious smells wafted from the kitchen. Dad appeared from the living room, newspaper in hand, his face breaking into a rare, wide smile. "There's my scientist," he declared, giving me an awkward but heartfelt hug. "Just in time to settle a debate. Your brother insists that dolphins sleep with one eye open. That can't be right, can it?" I laughed, recognizing his clumsy but genuine attempt to connect with my interests. Actually, he's right. Dolphins rest one hemisphere of their brain at a time, keeping one eye open to watch for predators and monitor their position in the water. Dad looked impressed. "Learn something new every day." He gestured toward the living room. "Come say hi to the others. Ryan brought Elise. You'll like her." As I followed him, I noted the subtle difference in his demeanor, the way he spoke, to me as an adult with expertise rather than a child to be managed. Small shifts, but meaningful ones. The living room was a tableau of holiday comfort. A decorated tree in the corner, presents scattered beneath. Ryan and his girlfriend cuddled. On the sofa, Megan sprawled across the armchair, texting rapidly. "Look what Santa brought early," Dad announced. Ryan bounded up, engulfing me in a bear hug. "Cass, finally! I've been dying to introduce you to Elise." A pretty girl with curly hair and kind eyes stood to greet me. "I've heard so much about you," she said warmly. "Ryan says you're studying how plastic affects marine life?" "Among other things," I replied, touched that Ryan had discussed my work with her. Megan glanced up from her phone with her characteristic dramatic sigh, but there was affection beneath the teenage attitude. "Thank God you're here. They've been insufferable. Mom keeps rearranging the tree ornaments, and Dad's been watching documentary marathons about ocean pollution." I raised an eyebrow. "Ocean documentaries, Dad? That's new." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Figured I should understand what my daughter's dedicating her life to. The simple statement, touched me deeply. 6 months ago, he had dismissed my research as playing in tide pools. Now he was educating himself about issues I cared about. Not perfectly, not completely, but he was trying. That evening unfolded with a warmth I hadn't expected. We ate. Mom's traditional pre-Christmas lasagna, played board games, and shared stories from the past months. I told them about the pod of dolphins that had adopted our research buoy as a curious toy, about the storm that had nearly washed away our equipment, about Dr. Reyes's fellowship nomination. They listened, really listened, asking questions, laughing at my anecdotes, celebrating my achievements without comparing them to anyone else's. When Ryan shared news about his internship offer, it didn't overshadow my stories. When Megan described her dance competition victory, no one suggested, "It was more important than my research. It wasn't perfect." There were still moments when old patterns threatened to emerge. Times when Mom reflexively centered Ryan's needs, or when Dad talked over me. But they caught themselves, corrected course, tried again. And I remained steadfast in my new boundaries. Neither aggressive nor accommodating, simply clear and consistent about my worth. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Mom. She was preparing cinnamon rolls for the morning, her hands working the dough with practiced ease. "Can I help?" I offered, washing my hands at the sink. She smiled gratefully. "Could you chop those pecans?" We worked in companionable silence for a while, the kitchen warm and fragrant with spices. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. "I need to tell you something about Hawaii." My hands stilled. We hadn't discussed the trip directly since our confrontation months ago. "Okay," I said carefully. She wiped her hands on a towel, meeting my eyes. "It was my idea not to tell you the truth. Your father wanted to be honest, but I convinced him it would be easier to say it was postponed." She swallowed hard. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The directness of her apology surprised me. "Why did you do it?" She sighed, sinking into a kitchen chair. "The trip was originally planned to celebrate your graduation, but then Ryan had that big breakup, and Megan was struggling with her dance competitions, and your dad was stressed about work. I thought we all needed a getaway. But I knew how much you'd been looking forward to it, and I couldn't bear to tell you we were still going, but it wasn't about you anymore." Her honesty was both painful and healing. "So you lied instead?" "Yes." She didn't try to justify it or minimize it. It was cowardly and unfair. I joined her at the table, processing her words. "You know what hurt the most? Not that you went without me. It was that you didn't think I deserved the truth." Tears filled her eyes. "I know that now. I told myself I was protecting you, but really, I was protecting myself from having a difficult conversation." She reached across the table, not quite touching me. "I underestimated you, Cassie. I've been doing that your whole life, and I'm so sorry." In that moment, I saw my mother clearly, not as the perfect maternal figure I'd once idealized, nor as the villain who had betrayed me, but as a flawed human being who had made mistakes but was genuinely trying to do better. "Thank you for telling me this," I said quietly. She nodded, wiping her tears. "I want you to know that I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I've treated you and your siblings so differently. It's not an excuse, just I'm working on it." This revelation stunned me. My mother, who had always prided herself on handling everything independently, was seeking help. It was perhaps the strongest evidence yet of her commitment to change. "That's really great, Mom," she smiled tremulously. "Your courage inspired me. The way you stood up for yourself, set boundaries, demanded better from all of us. I realized I needed to do some serious work on myself if I wanted the kind of relationship with you that I hope for." We finished preparing the cinnamon rolls in a different kind of silence. Not awkward or tense, but thoughtful, substantial. As I headed upstairs to bed, Mom called after me softly. "Cassie, I'm proud of who you're becoming. Not just your accomplishments, but your strength, your integrity, your willingness to fight for what you deserve." Her voice cracked slightly. "I hope you know that." "I'm starting to," I replied honestly. Christmas morning brought its own small revelations. The gifts under the tree reflected a new awareness of who I actually was, not who they had assumed me to be. Dad gave me an expensive field journal with waterproof pages, perfect for coastal research. Mom presented me with a professional-quality underwater camera. Even Megan's gift, a set of stylish but practical hiking clothes, showed thoughtful consideration of my actual interests. But the most meaningful gift came from Ryan. He handed me a small package wrapped in marine-themed paper, uncharacteristically nervous. "It's not much," he mumbled. "Just, I wanted you to know I get it now." Inside was a framed photo, not a family portrait or vacation snapshot, but a professional photograph of a solitary figure standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean at sunset. The silhouette could have been anyone, but the quote engraved on the frame spoke volumes. "The most powerful step in any journey is the one that leads to yourself." "Ryan," I whispered, genuinely moved, "this is beautiful." He shrugged, embarrassed by the sentiment. "You taught me something important, Cass, about being true to yourself even when it's hard, about not letting other people define you." He glanced toward Elise with a soft smile. "It helped me make some changes in my own life." That moment captured the essence of our family's transformation. We were learning from each other, growing together rather than at each other's expense. The painful Hawaii incident had catalyzed changes none of us could have anticipated, rippling through our relationships in ways that ultimately strengthened rather than destroyed them. The remainder of the holiday passed peacefully. We maintained our traditional activities: Christmas movie marathon, neighborhood light viewing, the annual puzzle competition, but with a new awareness of each other as individuals rather than roles. I was no longer just the responsible oldest child, but Cassie, with my own preferences, boundaries, and voice. On my last evening home, Dad suggested a walk through the snow-dusted neighborhood, just the two of us. As we strolled past decorated houses, our breath clouding in the cold air, he spoke with uncharacteristic openness. "I've been thinking a lot about that conversation we had after you discovered the Hawaii trip," he said, hands deep in his coat pockets. "About how we've treated you compared to your siblings." I nodded, letting him continue. I told myself I was being fair, giving each of you what you needed. But the truth is, I took you for granted because you made it easy to do so. He looked at me directly. That wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I'm trying to do better, he continued. Not just with you, but with all three of you. Being more conscious about equity, I guess you'd call it. I smiled at his earnest effort to use the right terminology. I've noticed. I appreciate it. I'm not going to get it perfect, he warned. Old habits and all that. I don't need perfect, I assured him. Just genuine effort and respect. He nodded thoughtfully. That I can promise. After a moment, he added, You know, when you first confronted us about Hawaii, I was defensive, even angry. But looking back, I'm grateful you had the courage to say what needed saying. You forced us all to grow up a little, me included. His words crystallized something I'd been feeling throughout this visit. The painful breaking had been necessary. Like a bone that must be reset to heal properly, our family had needed that moment of truth to address patterns that had silently damaged us for years. As we returned home through the gathering darkness, lights from Christmas decorations casting colorful patterns across the snow, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved or because our family was suddenly perfect, but because we were engaged in the challenging, necessary work of authentic relationship. The next morning, as I prepared to drive back to campus, my family gathered to say goodbye. There were hugs, promises to call, plans for future visits. But beneath these ordinary exchanges was a new foundation, one built on honesty, mutual respect, and the recognition of each person's inherent worth. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a final glimpse of them in my rearview mirror. Mom waving enthusiastically, Dad with his arm around her shoulders, Ryan and Megan jostling each other on the front step. My family, imperfect but evolving, no longer a source of quiet pain but of complicated, authentic love. Back on campus, I threw myself into the spring semester with renewed focus. The fellowship application Dr. Reyes had submitted on my behalf required additional materials, essays, research proposals, letters of recommendation, all due by early February. Between classes, research, and application components, January passed in a blur of productive activity. Through it all, I maintained regular contact with my family, but on my terms. Weekly video calls, occasional text exchanges, photos and updates shared when I felt like sharing them. They respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without comparison, and continued their individual efforts toward more balanced relationships. In late February, unexpected news arrived from Megan. She'd been struggling with dance for months, her passion for it waning despite her technical proficiency. After much soul-searching, she had decided to quit her prestigious dance company and explore other interests. Mom and Dad were so cool about it, she told me during our video call, her expression still holding traces of surprise. They just asked what would make me happy, and when I said I wanted to try photography instead, they signed me up for classes. That's fantastic, Meg, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Photography is a great fit for your artistic eye. She nodded. Enthusiastically, I've been documenting everyday stuff around town, finding beauty in ordinary things. She hesitated, then added more softly, I don't think they would have been so supportive before. Everything that happened with you. Her words confirmed what I'd suspected. The ripple effects of my standing up for myself had created space for everyone in our family to grow, to make choices based on genuine desires rather than expectations. March brought another significant development. An email arrived one Tuesday afternoon, its subject line causing my heart to race. Coastal Preservation Fellowship. Notification of status. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dear Ms. Cassandra Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Coastal Preservation Fellowship for the upcoming academic year. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The fellowship would provide substantial funding for my final undergraduate year, and prioritized placement in top graduate programs afterward. It was a career-making opportunity, a validation of my work and potential. My first instinct was to call the research station, to share the news with Dr. Reyes and my colleagues there. They had nurtured my scientific growth, challenged me to exceed my own expectations, created a community where my intellectual passion was valued and respected. My second call was to my family. Mom answered, her voice brightening when she recognized mine. "Cassie, what a nice surprise." "I got it," I said, unable to contain my excitement. "The Coastal Preservation Fellowship. I actually got it." "What?" Followed was a chorus of genuine celebration as she called the others to the phone. There were no comparisons to Ryan's achievements or Megan's activities, no subtle diminishment of my success. Just pure, uninhibited joy for me. "We need to celebrate," Dad declared. "What if we all come to you for a weekend? You could show us around campus, introduce us to your professors. Our treat." A year ago, such a suggestion would have filled me with anxiety. The pressure to manage everyone's experience, to ensure no one felt neglected, to make my family fit comfortably into spaces where I had carved out my independent identity. But now, the idea held appeal. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, reflecting on the journey of the past 9 months. The betrayal of the Hawaii trip had been painful, yes, but it had also been catalytic, pushing me toward growth I might otherwise have avoided for years. I thought of Dr. Reyes and her lessons about resilience, about how ecosystems respond to disruption by adapting, evolving, sometimes emerging stronger than before. Our family was like that, a complex system that had been jolted out of unhealthy equilibrium, forced to find new, more sustainable patterns. Would I have chosen this path? No. Given the option, I would have preferred my family to value me equally, from the beginning, to see me clearly without requiring the shock of confrontation. But looking at where I stood now, academically successful, emotionally stronger, surrounded by authentic relationships both within and beyond my family, I couldn't regret the journey. The most powerful truth I had learned was this: we cannot control how others treat us, but we can control what we accept. By refusing to settle for less than I deserved, I had not only changed my own life, but created ripples of transformation that touched everyone around me. As spring blossomed across campus, I looked toward the future with confidence. The fellowship would open doors I had only dreamed of. My research was gaining recognition. My family relationships, while still requiring consistent effort, had evolved into something more balanced and genuine. The Hawaii trip that should have included me had instead sent me on a different journey altogether, one that taught me not just about marine ecology, but about my own worth, my own strength, my own capacity for growth. It had forced me to confront painful truths, but also empowered me to create a life where I was valued precisely for who I was. Sometimes the deepest wounds become our greatest teachers. Sometimes exclusion leads to truer belonging. Sometimes being left behind is the first step toward finding your way forward. And sometimes the most important journey isn't to some tropical paradise, but to the place within yourself where you finally understand that you have always been enough, exactly as you are. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.